Hey there, friends. This is Bill MacDonald, the ELAR writing doctor. And today I wanted to introduce to you teachers who signed up for the editing webinar how to make sure that you understand the concept of teaching capitalization rules for kids who have fallen through the cracks, have gaps and holes in their learning. You may have to teach some skills in isolation. And the reason I would suggest starting with capitalization in the first 6 weeks is because it only requires your students in many of the rules, there's 25 of them that we're going to go over, to learn a word like in the pronoun I, or a phrase as in cities and stores, dates, restaurants. But when I teach this next rule, I want to show you how to apply it to the new tested items, the new question format where students will be required to do only 75% multiple choice at the max. And so the state is coming up with different ways on how to accomplish that. And one of the many methods is requiring multiple answers to one response. So I'm going to show you by using the binder how to do that. And it's going to be really simple. And I just suggest to you that since your students are going to get entire passages where they're going to have to do this, don't start there. Scaffold the instruction of multiple answers to a capitalization question, not at the passage level or even the paragraph level, but give your students one sentence, because in editing itself, most questions are going to be asking about one sentence in the passage for each question. And so a question can be asking about two mistakes inside one question. So for some of you that had asked for like a little summary of my binder, I went ahead and have it ready on my screen. I'm going to share a portion with my screen with you. This is a Zoom program. My binder starts, as you can see here, uh, giving credits, the table of contents. So there's a suggested scope and sequence, the teaching order, and it's all kind of here. And I changed colors to help you. There's an overview. Uh, I want you to notice, though, week one, we should start at the letter level. Page 10 through 27 in the binder allows you just to practice penmanship, letters, forming letters. And yes, you can teach cursive, but since we're transitioning to online responses, they will all be written in print where no letters are touching. So if you look at my hand for a second, this is Iron Man when he does his powers. No fingers are touching, and he uses that little button or whatever that is on his palm. Aquaman puts his fingers together so that he can swim faster. That's cursive. Well, if you have your letters together and you're trying to write print, I would call that printsive, since that's not how the kids are going to learn to type online. Then I suggest you practice using the pages, and I will show you page 18 and 19 on penmanship, where for kids who have trouble keeping their letters inside a line, it's going to help them practice number one, keeping their letters in their own little space, putting only one space between words and only two spaces between letters. The entire first 6 weeks, for those of you who are noticing kids who struggle, I have capitalization, the rules, all of the rules. There's over 25 of them that are going to be mentioned. It allows you some practice uh, for one page for every single rule first. And then we have open-ended single sentence capitalization. And this is part of what I would call the deer time. the daily editing and revising be because of our changes. It's going to be daily editing, extensions, essays, answers, responses, reading and revising of doc, development, organization, and conventions of your response. So the cool thing about pages 119 through 128, these were sentences all written by students on the actual STAR test. And so I went through several essays, hundreds and hundreds of essays, and looked for sentences that had multiple mistakes. And I left them open ended so that as we begin to transition to an open ended world like we're doing, you would already have something at your fingertips. And if you'll notice, I did the same thing for the second 6 weeks in punctuation. Page 162 through 173 are all open-ended punctuation mistakes with multiple errors. And I went ahead and kept the skills in isolation because if you haven't taught punctuation, I don't want to be having you and your students be practicing a skill they haven't even been modeled. It's highly unfair to students to ask them questions about things that you haven't taught. So in the third 6 weeks, because sentences at the uh, punctuation is at the sentence level and usage would be at the somewhat paragraph level, your students, I'm going to show you how to teach your students as part of the editing webinar, how to at least look at 2 to 3 sentences in the passage to be able to fix the usage mistake. And for those of you that are not familiar, it's subject verb agreement. Is the subject singular or is it plural? Is it simple or compound? Is the predicate um, simple or compound? Is it past tense, present tense, or future tense? Those are all complex things that you have to look at with usage. How is the word or phrase being used in a sentence? And again, the the open-ended format is on page 185 to 230. I felt like I needed to add more pages because that is such a difficult concept. And then I don't even get into revising where you're fixing content until page 230 or 31 of the binder. And so for those of you who are misunderstanding the concept of rigor and difficulty, all editing questions are only going to be asking about one sentence each, regardless if you teach high school, middle school, and I feel like I've heard this, I feel like your content is geared toward elementary. No, it's geared toward the way the test is tested, where they're only going to ask your students about one question, one sentence in a paragraph. Better turn off my phone so you guys don't have to be hearing that all morning. So don't misunderstand. You can have a very rigorous question about a sentence that's a standalone sentence and still practice a very high skill. And so what it allows your students to do is actually practice the format that they're going to see one sentence at a time for spelling, capitalization, and punctuation, 2 sentences when it comes to correcting a mistake that's in a sentence that where one of them is a sentence and the other one is missing the subject or the predicate. That's based on run-ons and fragments. And then finally at the packet paragraph level in usage, where we can at least teach the students how to combine 2 or 3 sentences and take a look at the subject verb agreement on those. So since my editing webinar is in capitalization, I'm going to take you to page 107 of the binder, and 107 on the binder is also page 107 in all of the digital copies. And so as you see here, here are a lot of the basic rules in color. And for those of you who bought the binder or one of the webinars and see there's in all those proper nouns, that's like it's like 10 or 15 different capitalization rules. And so in my new edition of the binder, I've added a page for each one of those so that your students can be, as they're reading passages and living their lives, they can look for capitalization rules that are following these concepts here. And so what you'll see is an entire page practicing each rule where the students have to just fix one or two mistakes following the rule that is being discussed, work on one skill at a time. You can see there that I have the format for kinder, pre-K, first grade for because I always believe in the concept of my age or more. This sentence has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words. I want you kinder teachers to understand that your students should be able to, as soon as possible, be able to read a sentence with 5 words, look at it for mistakes and say, okay, you are my best friend, period. I did not say capital or put on a pretend cap. So there's a mistake right there and capital U. And so if they can't write the entire sentence yet, then just have them notice that none of these sentences started with a capital and these are mixed. You'll see lots of different errors on here. And then we get into, let me show you the open-ended where part of the, and I'm going to read this from my phone, multi-select new test items require students to select more than one correct answer to a question. And this is going to be in math, reading language arts, science, and social studies. And so even if you only did a couple of day ELAR teachers, uh, the Dear Doc, the daily editing and revising of development, organization, and conventions. Well, what we're doing today is editing because it's conventions, because cups is the first, capitalization is the first letter of cups, and conventions is basically the grammar. So what you're going to do, teachers, is if you happen to teach a rule about the first word in a sentence, then you'll have your kids look at number 1, and this is page 119. The water is so fresh today. They would either write just underline the T of the, and I'll go ahead and annotate for you since we have that fancy little ability. Underline the T of the right there, and you could put a capital the on the line, or if you want them to practice writing the sentence in correct context, then I would suggest you have them write it and then not just see this sentence and see one mistake, but they say the entire sentence once they've rewritten it, and they would have written, look, and if you look at me in the corner here, put it back to mouse so that you can see me. Look at me in the corner. Capital, the water was so fresh today. What is the subject? Water. What about it? It was fresh. Was is past tense. That, and even though today is right now, it could be not fresh anymore. Let's look at number 2, requiring multiple answers to one question. So let's look at it. Our principal, Mrs. Period Nava, came to my classroom, period. Let's count mistakes. Capital our, one mistake. Principal, since they're saying our principal, we're not saying I need to talk to Principal Nava. Well, principal would be her title, but because you're talking about her being your principal, you don't capitalize. Capital misses because of a person's title. Capital Nava because of their last name came to my classroom, lowercase. So there's 4 mistakes in that question. I might suggest that you start with 1 mistake and then build up to 2 mistakes. But as you can see on some of these samples, just on this first page alone, these were all written by students. And so I wrote down what they wrote, and I even added some mistakes that I see many students make when they write. And so you'll see multiple open-ended questions like this. And then the cool thing about it is now that we're going to be living in a 25% open-ended world, one of the ways is to have them see a sentence in a passage or a paragraph, or in this case, a sentence on its own, and fix more than one thing in the sentence. So saying that you need to change, for example, number 8, Coach to capital Coach and Jones to capital Jones, those are both correct answers because there are two editing convention problems. Coach is her title and Jones is her last name. So that is an introduction for you editing webinar teachers on how to make sure you cover the capitalization rules, but begin to be able to follow one of the new test formats, the new question formats of having multiple answers to one question. What change should be made in sentence 4? It'll be what changes should be made in sentence 4, and there'll be 2 grammar mistakes of cups instead of just 1. And because I'm a math consultant, I'll also show you how to do multiple responses in open-ended format in math. Just type the words common sense in Facebook. Type the words Bill MacDonald writing if you're not already a member of my club, or the right prescription, which is how to write right in terms of making not just the reading connection, but writing connection. And I've said this a lot, teachers, but life happens at full speed, comma, but reading and writing happen in slow motion. And so, yes, the beginning of my binder is scaffolded and tiered, but it's because we have many middle school and even high school students making so many basic mistakes in conventions that you don't need an entire passage to cover. Just this last year alone, for you 7th grade teachers, whenever there's 2 things that are being talked about, I like to play sports like golf and fishing. Well, the test gave your students, I like to play sports like golf, comma, and fishing. Since there were only 2 things being talked about in the sentence as the objects, then you don't need a comma to separate them. And I don't need to teach a whole passage to teach that concept or that skill. Some kids don't need band-aids. Some kids don't need to take an entire passage and keep getting assigned entire passages. They need, it's like flipping a pyramid upside down and trying to make it balance on its point. If your kids are at the bottom of the pyramid, don't start at the rigorous level of making them read the entire passage and then try to figure out just about the 3 or 4 sentences that are being asked about in the entire passage. Another example that comes to mind for middle school was they tested your kids on one simple concept. The word summer was capitalized, on one sentence in a passage. I didn't need to read an entire passage to know that you don't capitalize the Four Seasons unless they're the name of the hotel. But that question got less than 50% correct in Texas. Another one, high school. We need to work on semicolons and colons. So when I get to editing webinar punctuation part, we're going to make sure that you high school and middle school teachers understand that there has to be an understanding of there's an independent clause followed by a colon. Colon is in the middle of your body. Now that's kind of corny, but being in the middle is going to help your students understand if my shirt here is an independent clause, then my pants will either be a dependent clause that follow a colon or an independent clause. I'll get it from a different closet, my pants. Then I got my shirt, a different closet. So the students got tested on a dependent clause followed by an independent clause followed by a colon, which was a list that supported the independent clause. Now that's pretty high level, but I don't need again an entire passage or even an entire paragraph to teach that concept. So in my binder, I call it Dear Doc because I want to be the doctor that helps you give prescriptions. They're going to really impact your kids, not keep giving them such high level quantity of material. They can't even handle the questions that are being asked because they're getting overwhelmed by the vocabulary and the multiple paragraphs and distracted by that instead of just focusing on what questions are being asked. So thank you for those of you who have already purchased the editing webinar. I will continue to show you uh, in my next videos one rule at a time so that we can practice both regular multiple choice, which will be 75% of the time starting next year. We'll practice editing and revising. For those of you that are in the revising webinar, we'll make sure that we practice reading and revising in both multiple choice and open-ended formats using the new question types that will be uh, potential questions that many students will be taking across Texas on a field test. So bless you. If you are watching this on YouTube, click like for me. Go ahead and subscribe as one of my YouTube members. What I do is I immediately move my YouTube videos over to Facebook. And the reason I do that is because, first of all, some people don't like social media. And so I'll go straight to YouTube. And so all you have to do is type my name in YouTube, Bill MacDonald Writing, and you'll be able to see my page. And then you can follow me there. If you type Bill MacDonald or the right prescription in Facebook, then you can join our ELAR writing club. I'm also a math minor and consultant. So you can join my Common Sense Math Club. Come as in come here, on, not off, sense as in the five senses and the subject math. And I'm going to show you how to do math in a way that gives surgery and MRIs to your students on questions that were very difficult this past year on the test. Please share this video. I look forward to training many of you this year. Email me at the word writing_doctor@yahoo.com for training information and fees. If you have the digital or hard copy of the binder, the very last page of the binder has my questionnaire and it has all of my training information and fees. And to help all of you out, I went ahead and lowered my price just a little bit for this transition year as we move into more reading questions and less editing and revising, but a lot more transition to open-ended responses that are going to require your students to do a lot of critical thinking. God bless you guys. Have a great Sunday and take care.